It's October and witches are everywhere. All the cool kids are out there doing it, getting their witch on. I have two questions for you though about the subject. Number one, what does a real witch look like? Would you know one if you saw one? And number two, what is it that real witches do? Now, answering the first question is probably really very easy, but can you answer the second one? Greetings, everybody. At the Crone House in the month of October, I am going to be doing a series of videos all about all things witchy, okay? I have planned a series of talking about what it is that witches really enjoy and what do witches do. So it should be an enjoyable series for everyone, whether you are an old-time witch like me or you are new, relatively new to being a witch, or you want to be a witch, you want to become a witch, okay? If you're a long-time witch like me, you might have a certain problem we seem to share, and that is that we are overcome, it seems, with stuff. We have so much stuff. I open a cupboard, I've got cupboards of herbs and cupboards of statues and cupboards of, cards, tarot cards, and all kinds of divination tools, and I just have stuff coming out of every nook and corner in my house, it seems. And I know a lot of other old timers have the same problem, and sometimes we feel like, oh, do I really need all this stuff? Well, we're going to be looking at that. What do we really need? And also, if you're somebody that's new to witchcraft, somebody who's new and just starting out, you might be overwhelmed with the idea of looking at all of our stuff and saying, oh dear, do I need to get all that stuff? What am I going to do? I don't have room to store it. I'm still maybe in the closet, etc. So we're going to examine some things about what it is that you really need and what you don't really need. But it all is going to depend on what kind of a witch you are or want to be. And yes, I think there are different kind of witches. I think most of us agree there are different kind of witches. We know we're different. Anyway, you can see very well here on YouTube we're different. But you know how we're different. What are the categories? And what items are you going to be using depending on what category you fit in? Now, we all fit in one or more of the categories. Some of us are only fit in one, and some of us fit in more than one. But it just depends. And we're going to talk about all of that too. I'm going to help you out. We're going to talk about that. So first we're going to break it down into the categories, and I'll give you examples of the certain things that you will need depending on the category of a witch that you fall into. While it is possible and most probable that your own witch persona actually fits into more than one of the categories, it is helpful to consider where your priorities lie, especially if you have limited space, or you are in the closet, or you are trying to be subtle about your being a witch. So I think it's helpful for all of us to really look at the categories and see, because I think our needs change. We might have been one kind of a witch for a certain period of time, like I was a solitary witch, for instance, and then I became a witch that did rituals with a public group. So I stopped doing rituals at home and I started just doing them out in public. And then I became a witch who became covened. And then I became and started doing things with other people. And then I became someone that, started to develop my own balance between some of these things. So my needs changed, the items that I needed changed, and what I was using changes, etc. So how I would define myself has changed, and I think that's true for many, many people. So let's first of all look at the categories and see where we fit. The first category is something that I would call a spiritual witch. Now, that might surprise you. I don't think it does at all. Witches are not spiritual. Some are very spiritual. Some are only spiritual. And what I mean by spiritual is these are the witches who do workings, probably maybe have devotion to a certain god or goddess, or many gods and goddesses, or even some who are consider themselves to be a member of like another religious affiliation, like Christian, but also a witch, so they follow the teachings of Christ, and they're also a witch. That's possible too. But first we're going to just look at their spiritual side. And it's also even witches who are in covens. I know several witches who have been coven witches who would not ever consider themselves to be spiritual, even though their sisters and brothers that gather for ritual are doing so on a spiritual basis. They personally don't have any private need to have any kind of devotion, spiritual devotion, as a part of their practice. So they are content to just have it with others. Okay. But some people are just totally spiritual witches and don't do anything else. And these are the kind of people, whether you are a spiritual witch completely, or you are sometimes consider yourself to have spiritual as part of your witch persona, a spiritual side, what would you need for that? What kind of things would you need? Well, you don't need a lot of things, but one thing you probably do need is some kind of a space, a sacred space that you can set up, either to use for devotions to a god or goddess, or to gods and goddesses, to have a space for meditation, to communicate with your inner self and the energies around you in whatever way you want. You might set up a place to offer prayers or offerings for the spirit world, the fairies, or whoever it is that you resonate with. Okay, you might need to have a little space to do that. And finally, a lot of people have just a space that they might offer to do healing. They might, these are the people that we see on Facebook all the time. I will be sending my prayers. I'll be sending energies, warm thoughts, good intentions to you. I'll be lighting candles for you. Having some kind of a space like that where you can do that. It doesn't need to be a big space. You don't need a lot of things. I want to show you my space, my own space that I have set up right now in my friend hall with my Buddha altar. My Buddha altar is primarily, he's a prosperity Buddha, but he's also and that has been a prosperity altar for many years for my husband and myself. But for right now, it's also set up for as a healing altar, and it's part of our spiritual practice. Our part, instead of calling things in to us, where we used to receive what was like saving, we had a lot of things we collected in Buddha's basket here that would, saving pennies and little things, putting a lot of importance on small things in order to gain more. We would do that. But now we have it set up so that we're offering what we can do for others. That is how we are going to gain, to be feeling feelings of prosperity for ourselves with what we can do for other people. So we have it set up as a healing altar. We offer healing candles. We have a healing candle that we light. This is for people, friends and family members, and friends of family members, friends and of other family members of friends, other people we know, that we will say prayers for, offer prayers, offer intentions. We also use this for intentions for animals or sick animals or lost animals or whatever people have need for. We do that, and we used to have a separate altar just for this, but now we like it very much to gather in a smaller space, because also we can also see this and maintain this altar at all times. So that is a spiritual part of our practice. So yes, we do have a spiritual part of our practice, but it's rather limited. We don't need a big space for that. We mainly focus on offering healing and intentions for others. Okay. The second category of witches that I'm going to identify today are what I call ritual witches. These are witches who gather or either hold a ritual, a space for rituals in their own home, or just with themselves or with another person, or they gather with other people like in a coven, or even in gathering in public ritual spaces, which we did for many years in a local temple. Gathering, casting a circle, calling in deity, calling in elementals. People do it for different reasons. They do it different reasons. They don't, some people cast a circle every time they do a spell, so they have a need to have a certain space that they can do that in. Other people are content with doing rituals elsewhere. Most of the witches that I know do not have a space in their home for ritual permanent. They set up a temporary ritual space when they're going to hold a ritual, and then they take it down. And that's mostly what we have done for many years. But in recent years, we have an opportunity in this room to have a ritual, a permanent altar here, and we have it set up at all times We change it out during the course of the year for different seasons or whatever and put different things on it. But at all times it is set up so it is possible we could do a ritual here. We could cast a circle and hold a ritual in this space. But mostly what we use this ritual space is for it is a space, it is a sacred space where we have representations of the deities, we have representations of the elements at all times. We maintain it as a sacred space, and we hold it for things like if we want to do things, like if we have, talismans that we want to consecrate and call the talisman, use the talisman. We would do a ritual and create a talisman that we wish to carry with us. After we hold this, do the spell on the talisman, the ritual on the talisman, whatever you want to call it, we will then hold it on the altar until we're ready to use it for the first time. It's like charging a battery for us. It's almost like, keeping a space. If I get a new tarot deck, or if I get any kind of things that I'm going to use for any purposes of magic, I will hold space on the altar for them temporarily until I'm ready to take them and use them. And one thing I do, like tarot decks, I always do that until I'm ready. I will bind a tarot deck and then I will put it on the altar and until I get a bag made for it, and then I will remove it from the altar. So that's the second kind of witch. Not all witches do that. That's just, they don't have any need for it at all. A lot of earth-based witches don't do that. They're outside, they're in their garden, they're in the woods and by the beach, wherever they are. They don't need a space for that. So if it's in your practice, you do, and you would want to have some kind of a deity represent whatever it is that you resonate with. What do you believe in? Usually some candles, very simple. Usually some incense, very simple. Usually some very simple tools, very simple. And we'll go into more detail about that another time. The third kind of witch I want to talk about today is the witch that I call the witchcrafting witch. Very crafting, making things, loves to make things. And I am very much into this. This is me, very much so. And one of the reasons that my covers are overflowing, really. I love to make my own tools. I love to make my own things that I use for, from what I grow. I grow a lot of herbs. I've done so many videos on this channel showing what I do with a lot of things. I've showed videos using making tinctures, making salves. I don't think I've done soaps, but I use herbs and things that I grow for soaps and oils and all kinds of things. So I also make my own items for spell work, my own items for protection. And those are things that not everybody does. I want to say, we don't all make all these things because some of us don't even use these things. I have to say that I know witches who don't use any kind of protection, when they don't put out any kind of protection. Some people, I have one friend who says she doesn't feel the need for it. Okay, that's good. Or if you don't do spell work, or if you don't do, if you don't do rituals or have a spiritual practice, you might not even need incense. A lot of people are very happy to make their own incense, but I need to make mine because I can't. Some of the oils and perfumes, the artificial perfumes, and some of those things just are not. They don't resonate well with me. They cause me to have headaches. I probably have a slight allergy to some of those things. I don't know what they are. So I just prefer to do my own. Okay. My main cupboard in my parlor is just overflowing with things. I have the things that I have in that cupboard. Basically, I've several cupboards in this room, which are full of nothing but herbs and powders and things. Where I use these things to make. I use them in spell work. I use them to make incenses. I make all my incenses. I make loose incenses that I burn on charcoal. I also make cones, and I've showed you that. I've showed you videos for those things. Also, I make my own. I make soap using a lot of these things. I make tinctures. I use a lot of these herbs in tinctures or in other kind of oils for salves or things like that. So, also oils. I do my own oils. I have basically 5 or 6 oils that I use all the time. I don't use any other kind of oils. They fulfill all my needs. but I make my own use, and a lot of the things that I use in those oils are things that I've collected, either grown or collected. So I cupboards for those things, cupboards for also I make my own forms of protection. I'm very into protection because I do magic. I am a witch. I read tarot. I feel the need for protection all the time in place. So we do witches jars and witches bottles, and I do purses and sachets and and talismans, and even for my pets and for my chickens and for my cats, for my dogs, cats, chickens, and for ourselves. We do this all the time. Okay. And the other thing is other kind of magic. I do other kind of magic. So my category of the witchcrafting witch, it spills over into my fourth category, which is the spellwork witch, a witch who actually does spells. And believe it or not, if you're new to watching the channels here on YouTube of witches, many witches do not do spell work. We have this thing in our head that witches sit up in trees and turn people into toads that are walking underneath the tree. A lot of witches don't. They don't want to mess. They don't want to mess with it. They have this thing that you don't want to do certain things on other people. We don't want to interfere with the free will of others or whatever. Don't get involved with that. But others are very much into spell work. I'm very much into spell work. So my covers are going to include things for that. I do puppets. I make puppets both for binding, and I make puppets for healing. You know, I do them, they're different kinds. I do bindings also, just regular bindings. And here you can see, I have a clip in here that I will show you. I'm simply binding a tarot deck. It's a new deck. I want to bind it to me. I have a little ritual that I do to bind that deck, a little spell. And then this deck will go from here. It will go onto my altar table until I get a bag made specifically for this deck. And then that deck and its binding cord will be transferred into that bag for all times. The cord will stay with it for all times. I put that spell on every tarot deck that I use frequently, particularly decks if I think I might take them from the house for any reason and use them elsewhere. I always bind them to me. So depending on your practice, you see, depending on what part of your practice, what kind of a witch you are is going to determine whether you need to have cupboards of herbs, whether you need to have oils, whether you need to have an altar, whether you need to have divination tools, whether you need to have statuary, whether you need to have. So don't be tricked into thinking you do. A lot of people think because you're a witch, oh, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that, you need this, you need that. And the shops everywhere are set up in that way. If you want to buy a tarot deck, oh, you probably also want to buy this statue of Cornunus. Or you also want to buy this, chakra wand. If you're not into chakra, don't buy it. If you're not into that, don't buy it. Chakra healing. Why would you need it? We need to be more discerning about what we have and what we need so that we can really use what we do need, what we do want, so we can be really effective witches. We can be the witches that we were wanting to be. If you would like some more information from this video on the same subject as this video, I will link to another video that I did that is maybe give you a little bit more information. But I want to tell everybody, mark your calendars for next week, because next week you want to make sure you stay tuned. If you are one of these witches who is interested in the witchcrafting witch, the witch that uses herbs, the witch that makes her own tinctures, the witch that makes her own incense, the witch that makes her own oils, what kind of things do you need to do that? We're going to talk about that next week, and I'm real excited to share that with you, because that's one of my favorite parts of being a witch. So my message for all of you witchy friends, it doesn't matter what kind of a witch you call yourself. It is the season of the witch. Get your witch on, get out there, be one of the cool kids, and really enjoy yourselves. And in the words of one of my favorite people, Frank Sinatra, it's such an ancient pitch. but one that I'd never switch, 'cause there's no nicer witch than you. Blessings.